Has the EU agreed to open membership talks with Ukraine? Would this be an unprecedented move? Plus, is Russia ramping up their offensive even as the winter freeze deepens? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's December 15th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get right into it. Okay. First, we're taking a look at the combat map, and you can see 82 combat engagements across the front lines. There hasn't been an update in the last 24 hours to the control map, so we're not even going to review it. But you can see Russian forces, again, absolutely fixated on Avdiivka and Bakhmut, which is honestly like sort of preposterous to think about. I mean, imagine you're a Russian soldier, and basically for a year, you have been fighting within about 10 kilometers, right, of the area you were before. So there's been so little advancement that you're talking about literally staying within a day's walk of the areas where you were fighting a year ago, and frankly, probably about 100,000 lives ago. Similarly, in Avdiivka, right, you can see Russian forces absolutely it's almost like they're being baited, right? If they could make no progress, then there's a chance that Russian forces would stop. They'd say, listen, we literally can't advance in Avdiivka. But they're almost making just enough progress that they continue to throw troops and material in it, sort of like sensing that perhaps there's some Ukrainian weakness. Though realistically, I think that Ukrainians are probably just content to destroy Russian troops and equipment en masse. This isn't unlike what both sides said about Bakhmut, that they had planned to use it as a meat grinder, that Ukraine was going to grind down aggressive Russian troops, and that Russia was using its troops to grind down the Ukrainian defenders. And there's obviously truth to both, right? After the Battle of Bakhmut, the Wagner group was basically retired from the field and then disbanded. And the Ukrainian military, right, according to at least recent reports by the Washington Post, indicate that the Ukrainian military actually lost a lot of its combat experienced troops, and that the majority of the soldiers in those brigades that took part in the counteroffensive, they weren't combat experienced troops. They were totally green troopers, which is itself sort of insane to me, because I really had believed the entire time that the fighting in Bakhmut was being done by second-line folks, older soldiers, territorial defense brigades who are holding the line against Russia's best, while the seasoned Ukrainian forces were the ones training up in the counteroffensive. So hearing that they sent totally inexperienced troops to lead their most critical mission is sort of insane to me. And it makes me realize that there were a lot of rumors that the U.S. had been furious when the Ukrainians were defending Bakhmut last year at the cost of so many lives. And I now understand where that anger came from, right? Imagine your trainers report, hey, listen, Ukraine is sending us brand new guys who were driving cabs like a week ago. And they're telling us that we have to train them to be combat soldiers to go up against a seasoned, experienced Russian military. The trainers must have been like furious to be like, hey, listen, rotate these guys elsewhere in the front, pull off the inexperienced guys elsewhere on the front line, and let them get trained up on how to do this, right? Let the guys who've seen the Russians up close. But again, it's looking back after 2 years of war, right? Of course, both sides could say things they wish they had done differently. But as you can see, Russia, right, just launching a smattering of attacks: Kupiansk, Kremina Lyman, Verbova. Not really a ton of movement in either direction. But if you're like me, you need to give yourself a gift here this Christmas, and give yourself the gift of having enough energy to deal with your family members. That's why I wanted to talk about Strike Gum. Strike Gum is, of course, a veteran-owned company, namely owned by this veteran here, but it's made in the USA in a facility in Denver. Basically, it is an energy drink alternative. I found a way to take 90 milligrams of caffeine, as much caffeine as an energy drink, and I put it into a single piece of gum. 90 milligrams in here, plus 100 milligrams of alpha GPC. But what this gum doesn't have is sugar. totally sugar-free, so it won't screw up your diet. That way you can save your calories and your carbs for decent stuff, because I don't care what anybody says. Energy drinks taste weird, okay? You can save it for your cookies and your cake and your pie. Have a Christmas cookie for me. But if you, the best part, of course, of Strike Gum is that in addition to being really cost effective relative to an energy drink, right? Like if you get a tray, it works out to like 89 cents a piece, less if you even use the military discount. But 50% of the profits from this first production run of Strike Gum are being donated to charities that support Ukrainian civilians who've been injured or displaced in the conflict. So if you want to support Ukraine, support your favorite creator, and best of all, get a just objectively better source of energy, check us out, strikegum.com. Okay, let's talk about the real story, which is that the European Union leaders have agreed they're going to open membership talks with Ukraine. I don't think there's ever, in the history of the EU, been a member who's been inducted while in a state of active war. The European Union seems to have some level of mutual defense treaty, and by bringing Ukraine in, it may activate that mutual defense treaty. It's also likely that a lot of the more developed European countries may actually not want this, because it would grant Ukrainians en masse the ability to relocate and live and work in these other economies. And they may want that. They may want a surge of young workers coming in. But these developed economies may view them as a threat to their native population, especially if indeed their economy is starting to slow or get hit with major inflation issues. But it's about more than it's about a little more than just treaties and economics, right? But the important thing to remember is that, talks are just that, talks. Don't overload things. The EU is unlikely to bring in Ukraine and then immediately trigger an Article 5, mutual defense and involve the larger European community in this war. It's not likely to happen. This is just European Union leaders just agreeing to open membership talks. Of course, Zelensky calling it a victory for his country and all of Europe. And the European Council president called it a clear signal of hope for the people of these countries and the continent. Again, this isn't anything bad, but let's not pretend that this is more than it is. But that doesn't stop, of course, what I think are likely Russian-aligned outlets from wording things in a way that's intentionally clickbaity. This is what I'm talking about. Look at this headline here. EU grants membership talks in the midst of war, bypassing Hungarian objections. And notice the way this headline is structured. The first 4 words of the headline communicate something fundamentally different than the remainder of it. The EU grants Ukraine membership talks in midst of war. And this is really, really annoying because that's not the story. Yeah, but like, you're not granting someone membership talks, you're opening them, right? No one would say this, right? This is so strangely worded in English that it has to be a deliberate effort by these outlets to try to create a clickbait type narrative, to make it look like or create the perception that Ukraine has gotten EU membership. Which of course would be a disaster and would be something that everyone in the EU should worry about, right? Being pulled into an unwelcome war. You can see the Economist with a much more reasonable headline, right? Ukraine takes a big step towards EU membership. EU's leaders agree to formally open accession talks with it and with Moldova, which is fascinating too, because Moldova is a very, very Russian-aligned country. So a fascinating sort of juxtaposition of both the way these spin machines tend to work here. Remember, you can be a pro-Ukrainian spin, a pro-Russian spin, but you can also just want to spin things in a way that produces clickbait and attention, right? The attention economy is real. Anyway, guys, that is really all I had for you. Thank you so much. As always, hit like and subscribe. And a huge thank you to our Colonel tier members of Combat Vet News, our Lieutenant tier members. I could not do this without you guys. Thank you so much, and I will see you all in the next one. Cheers.